At the first hit was at age 14. From the first hit till now, my whole life went downhill.
It's so easy to get drugs. In class, I see kids, with even the teacher there, someone will give them money, and they'll hand them joints or, a bag.
She was a straight-A student, and now there's nothing left for her. Her brain's gone. She got holes in her brain.
Parents need to understand that it doesn't matter who their kid is, it doesn't matter who they are. They can do drugs if they want to, they can get them.
It was my escape, and that's why I did it.
Alcohol, drugs, inhalants. These are the substances that many kids use and abuse. These are the poisons that threaten their well-being and the hopes of all who love them. Fortunately, the majority of our children do not use illicit drugs, but they are exposed to them around our homes, our schools, and our communities. Ultimately, it's our responsibility to support all young people, whether it's to help them stop using or to keep them from experimenting with drugs in the first place.
With more kids being challenged at younger and younger ages with less of a safety net or support system around them and fewer adults to really engage and empower them, that's a toxic mix that can lead to high use of alcohol, drugs, and other chemicals.
And it's critically important that educators as a group and as individuals learn to recognize some of those things that would indicate that students are taking drugs so that they can get the help to them immediately.
The idea that our kids might be using drugs is tough for many parents to accept. Every child is unique, and it's our responsibility to help all our children maintain those special qualities that drugs attempt to destroy.
Alcohol and drugs, the biggest issue associated with them is that of stigma.
Oftentimes you'll have parents of a kid who may be completely stoned on pot every day, and because the parent does not want to face the shame associated with the fact their kid may have an addiction, they will completely deny it.
The Asian community, it's a very big cultural stigma. Our community is very good at hiding, and so in some ways we're functional addicts. And so we may still be doing well at school, but these kids are going home and then telling their parents, I'm going to go to the library with my friends, but they're off partying.
Advances in research and technology have not only enriched our understanding of this insidious problem, it has also redefined our approach to stopping its impact on our children. We need to recognize, learn, and act. Recognize the fact that there is a substance abuse problem and that there are reasons why kids use drugs. Learn to identify the various types of substances, how they affect the brain, and what signs indicate their use. And then act to reduce the risks that kids will fall prey to substance abuse by applying simple common sense and proven methods. Technology has helped us to appreciate many aspects of the human condition, but technology is limited since it does not allow us to probe deep inside the heart of a child to understand why he or she begins to use alcohol and drugs. We are a community of great diversity, and in an effort to gain better insight into the drug problem, we enlisted the help of high school teenagers from across this state to take their own cameras and ask their peers why kids use drugs.
It's really hard to go against something if you have a group of peers against you.
Young people do not identify parents as role models, that they see their peers as a stronger role model because parents are not serving in that capacity.
Well, when I would get home from school, weed was the way I dealt with being bored. Marijuana was my activity to do, my choice of entertainment.
Boredom's a factor. I mean, for kids that have no place to go, nothing to do, they're not engaged in an activity.
Stress is a major factor in kids, teenagers today, because we have so much to do. We have so much on our plates. We have to do clubs and we have to have the right classes just to get into college.
Stress is one of those most critical reasons that young people take drugs. And I think so many times we in education do not understand when there's a student sitting right in front of us that the lesson at hand for that day might not be the number one thing in their life.
I've got friends whose parents buy them alcohol, drugs. Obviously, their parents are not seeing what they're doing to their kid's life.
We know that parental attitudes about drug use have something to do with their kids' drug use.
There's usually stages that we look for in addiction, and of course the first stage is one of experimentation, and we don't know if they'll go on to formulate an addiction or not. The next stage is where they're actually addicted to a substance. This is when they're telling you it feels good, they like it, they need it.
By recognizing the fact that drugs, including alcohol, are a problem and understanding the reasons why kids use them, we've taken a significant step towards preventing substance abuse. President John F. Kennedy once said, "In a time of turbulence and change, it is more true than ever that knowledge is power." The more we know about drugs, their impact on our kids' health and development, and how to detect their use by young people, the better prepared we'll be as parents and educators to meet the challenge. We must learn how to identify the most common drugs used today, as well as the signs that may indicate a problem with our kids. What exactly do we need to know about drugs? Well, we can start with the fact that substance abusers frequently begin by using substances that are easily obtained. Often referred to as gateway drugs, they include alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana. The single most dangerous drug teenagers use is one many adults dismiss: alcohol.
The reality is alcohol and drugs all do the same thing to the brain in terms of addiction. Some of the drugs that people become addicted to are just freeze-dried alcohol.
And alcohol dependence is associated with a number of adverse effects, like the shrinkage of certain structures within the brain and a reduction of certain kinds of cognitive functions.
Society holds a tolerant view towards drinking, and although alcohol is legal for adults, it is not for teenagers. Yet many people refuse to accept the fact until confronted with the dark side of excessive drinking.
There's a young lady who was in our programs who was just an amazing young lady, was involved in Friday Night Live, didn't do a thing wrong. A 19-year-old decided to drink and drive and killed her. So even if your young person is making a good choice, somebody else may not be.
The second gateway drug is tobacco. Though the tobacco industry's reach has been somewhat stunted in recent years, tobacco use still kills more people annually than any other drug.
We have great concern about teenagers starting smoking as opposed to adults. And some of this comes from the fact that the brain is developing during adolescence. And we think that early exposure to nicotine may actually increase the number of nicotine receptors that the brain has, and thereby make it more difficult to quit later in life.
Next to alcohol, marijuana is the drug of choice among young people. Commonly called weed, grass, or smoke, marijuana is often sold and stored in small plastic bags. It is usually smoked in hand-rolled cigarettes or pipes and has a strong, pungent odor. Paraphernalia for its use includes unusual-looking pipes and water-filled pipes called bongs, cigarette papers and roach clips used for holding the ends while smoking. A more potent cousin to marijuana is hashish, or hash. It's a brown gummy extract of the cannabis plant that's dried and compressed into balls or cakes. Because of its potency, hashish is sold in smaller quantities and smoked in small bowl pipes. In addition to gateway drugs, one of the most dangerous pastimes for a significant number of elementary and middle school kids is the use of inhalants, often called sniffing, huffing, or bagging. Inhalant use can cause severe damage to the brain and nervous system.
Patients who engage in this activity have significant portions of their memory wiped out.
For many unfortunate kids, these poisons lead to nothing more than a life fraught with medical problems. Even one use can be fatal. Cocaine is an intensely addictive stimulant. It is normally sold on the street as a fine white powder in plastic bags, glass vials, or in small foil or paper packets. Small mirrors or other hard, smooth surfaces and razor blades are paraphernalia often associated with its use. Usually inhaled through the nose with a short straw or rolled up dollar bill, cocaine can also be dissolved in water and injected intravenously.
It's possible actually to have a heart attack or stroke just from one use of cocaine. Unfortunately, as a physician, I cannot tell you whether you're going to be that person. It really is Russian roulette.
A more potent form of cocaine is rock, or crack. It's cheaper than the powder form and smoked with a pipe, and is highly addictive. Methamphetamine is a dangerous and unpredictable stimulant that's very popular among teens and young adults. Commonly referred to as speed, crank, or meth, this drug comes in many forms: brown and white powders, pills, and capsules. It can be snorted, injected, smoked, or taken orally. Meth is often produced in clandestine labs and can be dangerously impure.
The medical consequences, unfortunately, can be quite severe in that the individual who uses methamphetamine can have permanent brain damage. Those changes to the brain don't necessarily get better.
Ice, glass, or crystal are some of the street names for a smokable form of methamphetamine. It is sold in small, clear packets called papers and is smoked in a glass pipe with an enclosed bowl. Ice looks like rock salt or rock candy. Prolonged use of this treacherous drug creates profound paranoia or psychosis much more rapidly than other types of methamphetamine.
One of the biggest drugs that I see a huge boom in right now is crystal meth or methamphetamine. Drugs that have amphetamine-like properties, such as cocaine or crystal meth, all do reduce the appetite, and a lot of young women are very savvy to this.
Although receiving less publicity than more fashionable drugs, heroin continues to be a major problem in this country. Sometimes called black tar, China white, or Mexican brown, heroin is a powder derived from a certain variety of poppy. It ranges in color from white to dark brown, but on the West Coast is most often seen in its black tar form. It is sold in small foils or paper packets, toy balloons, or tiny plastic wrapped balls. Heroin can be inhaled through the nose or smoked, but is most commonly injected. And because of this, heroin users are at risk for contracting HIV, hepatitis C, and other infectious diseases. An emerging concern affecting teenagers is the abuse of prescription drugs and over-the-counter medicines. Pain relievers like Oxycontin or oxycodone are legally prescribed for severe pain, but when abused or illegally used, they produce opium-like effects. Use may result in long-term effects like respiratory depression and psychological and physical dependence. Another legitimate drug regularly abused by young people is Ritalin, medically prescribed to treat attention deficit disorders in children. When abused, it mirrors many of the same stimulant effects of cocaine or amphetamines. DXM is a cough-suppressing ingredient in a variety of over-the-counter cold and cough medicines. In high doses, it can alter time perception and induce visual hallucinations. In severe cases, it can induce seizures and strokes. Just as fashions and music change with each new generation, so does the emergence of new drugs. Most recently is a group called club drugs, so named because of their notorious connection to the club and rave party culture. They include GHB, ketamine, and ecstasy. GHB affects the central nervous system. It is thought to build muscles and enhance sexual performance. GHB can be colorless and odorless. It comes in clear liquid, white powder, tablets, and capsules.
Hidden danger for your son or daughter, particularly your daughter, is that this drug could be placed in a drink. And I don't mean just an alcoholic beverage. It could be placed in a soda. It could be placed in water.
GHB can cause both amnesia and it can cause coma. It's often used as a date rape drug.
Ketamine is a general anesthetic used by veterinarians. It distorts sounds and sights and produces feelings of detachment. It comes in powder and liquid forms, tablets, and capsules, and can be ingested, smoked, snorted, or injected. 1 gram can result in memory loss, coma, and even death. The most popular club drug is ecstasy, commonly known as XTC, X, and E. Taken orally in tablets or capsules, ecstasy is also called a feel-good drug in that it produces profoundly positive feelings and empathy for others, as well as eliminates anxiety and inhibitions. What most people don't know about ecstasy is that it can also cause hallucinations, hyperthermia, dehydration, and liver damage. The pervasiveness of club drugs have given rise to a new, hazardous form of entertainment known as raves.
I'm a little East High, short and stout. Show me some love to trip me out. When I get all sober, hear me shout. Pop a pill and roll me out.
Raves offer unlimited opportunities to obtain club drugs.
They're very deceiving. They advertise themselves as a no drugs, drug-free, no alcohol, all ages, dance party, and it's not that way at all.
There was tons of security guards, so you'd think it'd be safe, and she took too many, and the security guards went up to her and said, "Are you okay?" And she wasn't okay.
That's my pupil.
That's your pupil.
Before I became a police officer, I used to work at a dance club as security, and they had raves there. You know, we had kids as young as 13, 14 years old, all the way up to adults going in there. They're holding hands, they're hugging each other, they'll stay in groups, and you'll notice that everybody's touching one another. It's just to enhance each other's feelings and to give each other the ultimate high that they can get.
Some of the things that teenagers do at raves to enhance the experience of using ecstasy is put vapor rub on their upper lip, and they may even put a surgical mask over it to concentrate the fumes. Glow sticks also just enhance the sort of visual sensation from the ecstasy. Some of the other things you may see on the dance floor are kids using pacifiers or sucking on lollipops, because ecstasy can cause you to clench your jaws or grind your teeth.
You feel you can drive a car right now?
Yeah.
You think you can do it safely?
Yeah, I drive the car all the time after I roll.
Parents take their young kids and drop them off at the front gate and pick them up 20 hours later, and who knows what could have happened.
Besides the symptoms specific to the drugs we just described, there are a number of behavioral and physical signs that may accompany substance abuse. However, determining whether or not our kids are on drugs can be tricky, since many of these signs often mirror behavior kids exhibit as they develop. Does your child have memory lapses or difficulty in concentrating, or acts confused or dizzy? Have you noticed poor physical coordination, a dramatic shift in your child's energy? Has your child suddenly changed sleep patterns, getting more or less sleep than usual, or just a plain unhealthy appearance? Alcohol or other drugs may be the reasons.
Now, I've gone into teenagers' bedrooms and found drug and alcohol posters plastered on the wall, drug memorabilia or diagrams being put on their test papers. These signals are all around, and that the parents tend to act as though, gee, I didn't know.
Certain behavioral changes at school and at home may indicate a substance abuse problem. Changes like being secretive or more hostile towards you, changing friends and not discussing their activities, trouble with school authorities or the police, loss of energy and motivation, a drop in grades or truancy, a loss of interest in family activities are strong indicators of potential problems. Also, be alert to your child suddenly having more money or a hostile attitude about discussing the subject at all. By themselves, these signs could mean a million different things. What's important to look for is a pattern. Our job as parents and educators is to strengthen our ability to detect these patterns by being vigilant in observing their behavior and trusting our instincts to recognize changes that signal the possibility of a substance abuse problem.
My friend that slipped on the way, all I do is tell him that I care for him. I'm there for him. I don't want to see him, I want to lose him. And he goes, I love you too, but I love this stuff. It's in their head that they have to have it.
It's one thing for parents and educators to learn all they can about substance abuse and why kids use drugs and alcohol, but it's quite another to convince kids that these substances can cause irreparable harm to their health. Science has now given us the ability to look inside a user's head and through graphic images show vividly and precisely just how drugs inflict long-term damage to the brain.
We know that the brain actually doesn't fully develop as it would in someone who wasn't exposed to the drugs.
Methamphetamine impacts the neurotransmitter dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical that allows us to feel pleasure, but methamphetamine tricks the brain into allowing dopamine to flow unregulated. At first, this may heighten and extend the feeling of pleasure, but over time, the damage will cause abusers to find it difficult to feel pleasure at all and result in severe depression and extreme paranoia. Brain imaging also provides experts with direct evidence that chronic use of ecstasy, or MDMA, harms another major neurotransmitter called serotonin. Damage to this system can cause memory loss, depression, and dramatic increases in body temperature. The beating drugs inflict on the brain is shocking, especially highly toxic drugs like ecstasy. One look at a brain before and after taking ecstasy illustrates the long-term damage these drugs cause the brain.
The brain doesn't distinguish a brain insult that's chemically induced from a blow to the head by a baseball bat.
Most parents and educators agree that it is our duty to learn all we can about substance abuse to safeguard our children. But hospitals, rehab centers, even obituaries are full of the names of sons and daughters of well-intentioned adults. If we truly want to stop the assault of drugs on our kids, then we have to be willing to act on what we learn.
Doing nothing is not an option. If you're an educator and you see the signs of your student declining, you have to act. If you're a parent and you see their attitude is starting to change, you're the parent, they're the child. It's your responsibility to intervene.
We can start by setting a good example.
We need to be very authentic with our children because they're testing us. They're watching us to see if we'll walk our talk or if we're being inconsistent. So part of this good parenting strategy, I think, is to really model for our kids how to cope with difficulties.
The first thing you teach kids is to ask questions. If you're my friend and you have a history of trouble, I need to check it out if you're asking me to do something before I go with you. The second thing we teach them to do is to name the trouble. And with younger children, they can do that easily. They can say that's trouble, that's drug use.
Sure? No, well, what if we get caught?
The third thing we teach them is to talk about consequences. If I do that, my parents would.
And my parents will kill me.
This is why parents need to make sure that they let their kids know what are the consequences in our family. And then the next thing we teach them to do is suggest an alternative. They shift peer pressure. Now it's the kid who's pressuring them that has to make a decision. And the last thing we teach them to do is lead, but leave the door open. That's a hard thing for kids to do, but I believe it's a social skill that we can teach. And what the research tells us is that kids who possess that social skill are much less likely to get involved in drug use or violent behavior.
We have to create an environment where we can communicate openly with our kids about drugs, who their friends are, and any problems they may be having.
If a parent talks to their kid, they're more likely to listen than if they go and yell at them, because then they're going to want to just rebel against what they're saying. I'd say the best way that a parent could get through to their kids would be to not accuse them and to let them know that they love them and that they care for them.
If you have a history of addiction in your family, if you've seen someone who's been addicted, it's very important for you to talk to your kids about this and to be open about it and not to be ashamed. It is a medical illness. And if you can avoid your kid having to experience what someone in your family had to experience, do it.
Kids need to know that parents care. Plan family dinners. Help them with their homework. Do fun things together. Be involved in their lives.
Best way to get kids off of drugs is basically to keep them occupied, keep them busy enough to where they don't even need them anymore.
What the research says is if you're part of a faith community, it increases the odds that kids make it. If they have a lot of supervised time and not a lot of unsupervised time, they are more likely to make it. It says if they're involved in extracurricular, co-curricular activities and an artistic outlet, whether it's dance, drama, music, art, writing, kids who are involved in those outlets do better.
I think parents should pay attention to their kid, know what they're doing, try to know what's going on in their kid's life.
How many kids come into the house, run to the bedroom, and the parents never see them visibly, never check on them? Our parents are taught to go to their teens, and that means looking in their eyes, smelling their breath, getting close enough to them. Stop them at the door. Tell them ahead of time, when you come in tonight, I'm going to give you a kiss on the cheek because I love you.
Finally, we need to work with schools to build protective factors that lower the odds that our kids will use drugs. This includes creating strong bonds between students and the school, building kids' strengths, and viewing young people as a valuable resource.
The greatest predictor for a kid doing well in school was their sense of bonding and connectedness to their peers and to the adults and to that institution.
Young people are going to connect. The whole question is, who will they connect to?
The most important thing is don't be afraid, act, ask questions, and just love them to death.
Ultimately, the only way to confront substance abuse by our kids is to know the facts. Recognize there is a substance abuse problem and why kids use them. Learn all you can about drugs, what they look like, and the effects they have on children. Act on the simple things you can do to lower the probability that your kids will abuse drugs, alcohol, or inhalants. To do nothing is to concede victory to drugs and addiction. Being proactive is the best means of helping our kids avoid or escape the devastating effects of substance abuse.